Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has confirmed that he has apologized to President Donald Trump over an anti-tariff ad that sparked a diplomatic row, sparking Trump to respond by slapping an extra 10% tariff on Canadian goods and freezing trade talks, which Carney has stated that will resume when Washington is ready. Israeli media has reported that body parts handed over by Red Cross do not belong to any of the missing hostages after forensic examinations were completed. The transfer had followed Israel's return of 30 Palestinian bodies to Gaza, a move seen as part of efforts to sustain a fragile ceasefire despite recent deadly clashes. Meanwhile, amid the Gaza peace plan, Israel has redeployed its forces in Gaza, and Israel has launched fresh strikes on several locations of the Gaza city. At least 5 people have been reportedly killed in the attack as well. Russian Defense Ministry has stated that Ukrainian soldiers surrounded in Pokrovsk have begun surrendering themselves, while Ukraine's military has stated that it is raising number of its assault groups to counter the attack of Russian troops. The newly elected Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi has stated that there are no plans to renegotiate the $550 billion investment package agreed with US President Donald Trump earlier under the former Prime Minister Ishiba's term in office. Taiwan's representative Lin Xin-He has stated that he met U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at the APEC summit to discuss semiconductors and safe supply chains. Lin has stated that the 40-minute meeting in Gyeongju focused on technology cooperation as Taipei seeks lower U.S. tariffs on exports beyond semiconductors. China's military has monitored and tracked a Philippine joint patrol in the South China Sea on October 30th to 31st, warning it seriously undermined regional peace and stability. The statement comes as Washington and Manila have announced a new joint task force to boost security cooperation. France's National Assembly has rejected a left-wing proposal to impose a wealth tax on the ultra-rich, backing instead a government plan to tax holding company assets. Now we start with Russia and Ukraine. Russia has launched the highest number of missile strikes on Ukraine in more than 2.5 years on October alone. Moscow have fired 270 missiles, which was a 46% increase from September, targeting the country's energy grid in nighttime attacks. These strikes have caused widespread blackouts affecting many as Kyiv implements rolling power cuts to manage shortages. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the attacks, accusing Russia of seeking to create chaos and apply psychological pressure on civilians. Russia has also fired over 5,000 long-range drones last month. Kyiv has responded with strikes on Russian oil depots and refineries, aiming to disrupt Moscow's energy exports. In related developments, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants against top Russian military officials over attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The Ukrainian military has stated that it is raising the number of its assault groups in a bid to counter Russian forces. Ukrainian officials have said that the situation in the city of Pokrovsk remains complicated and dynamic. Ukrainian forces report that they have improved position in several districts of the city, signaling ongoing efforts to stabilize the front lines. Meanwhile, according to a Russian news agency, the Russian Defense Ministry claims that Ukrainian soldiers surrounded in Pokrovsk have begun to surrender. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Anna Matveeva. She's a senior visiting research fellow at King's College London and Russia Institute London. Thank you very much for joining us. Good to see you. Doctor, now what's your analysis on this situation? Are we heading towards the end of this war as we know the logistics over Pokrovsk and how it could impact Ukraine's front line?
I think, unfortunately, we are not heading towards the end of the war. We are heading towards further escalation. If I may remind the audience about the fighting over Bakhmut in 2023, 2 years ago, that was another Ukrainian city, a very bloody contest over about a year. Eventually, Russian forces have taken it. That has not really changed overall battlefield position. Yes, that was a setback for the Ukrainian side, but it did not really make a kind of strategic breakthrough for Russia. There have been analysts, including in the West, saying that it is not really worth for Ukrainians to spend so much manpower and equipment and suffer various casualties to defend this town, that perhaps they should have withdrawn and concentrate somewhere where they could really hold the line. We are seeing perhaps the repetition of the same story with Pokrovsk. Yes, it is important. Yes, it's under considerable pressure, and both sides are maximizing their effort. My prognosis, if you like, is that eventually the Russians would overpower Ukrainian defenses and it will be in the Russian hands. However, two questions arise. Whether it is worth Ukrainians to defend it at considerable cost, or maybe withdrawal strategy is a more sensible one so that they can rescue their troops. And secondly, whether that would create a launchpad for Russians to really launch a further offensive into the west of Donetsk region. That's what they would like to do, but the fortifications are pretty formidable. Ukrainians have been preparing for that eventuality, so we do not know whether capture of Pokrovsk would actually mean some kind of decisive victory for the Russian side, which will make their further advance unstoppable.
Yes, Doctor, thank you for sharing that perspective. I agree with you. The war, it seems to be progressing. Do you think that there could be, U.S. could be helping out Ukraine with giving out Tomahawk missiles, or do you think U.S. still is hesitating to provide more aid? And do you think there is any other country in EU or in the coalition for the willings that could counter Russia's front line, or to give more support for Ukraine in the front lines?
I don't really think so. Yes, they can perhaps give more weapons here and there, but European stocks are largely depleted. So they are looking at buying weapons either from the US, which are very expensive, or from South Korea or some other producers. United States had actually last night implied that they would be willing to provide Tomahawks, but presumably because Europeans would be paying for them. Operational significance of Tomahawks is probably not great because it may take 15 to 18 months to embed them in a Ukrainian army so they can be launched from the territory of Ukraine. That would require also the US military personnel to help with launches and navigation. That Ukraine just doesn't have that kind of technical capacity to do so. So in that sense, a military kind of dimension is nearly exhausted. But of course, political dimension of Tomahawks is more important, because if that would actually be happening, and we don't quite know, that would signal a very major shift in Donald Trump's mind on how he wants to approach this conflict. So far, we have seen lots of zigzagging. It Trump can do many things, including that if he would think that there is no deal in the making, he can really say, well, okay, I give up on you, on both of you. So it's not my war, it's European war, then it is up to Europeans to deal with it. And that's perhaps where we are heading in the long run.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Anna Matvieva, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. Now, Russia has announced plans to strengthen naval cooperation with ASEAN member states as part of its broader push to expand engagement in the Asia-Pacific region. Russia's Deputy Defense Minister Oleg Savelyev has released a statement saying that Moscow will increase the participation of its navy in joint military activities under both the ASEAN and ASEAN Plus formats. He has also recalled that the first Russia-ASEAN naval exercises were held back in 2021, which has enabled sailors from both sides to conduct joint operations at sea. Additionally, the minister has also highlighted that earlier under the Russia-Myanmar chairmanship in 2023, international anti-terrorism exercises were successfully held in the Russia's Far East region and observes participants from 12 other ASEAN countries. As per him, these exercises helped military personnel from participating states gain experiences in joint planning, preparations, and execution of anti-terror operations. Russia has also been deepening military cooperations with individual ASEAN members, including Indonesia and Vietnam. The two sides have held joint naval drills and defense strategy dialogues in recent months. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Anna Matvieva. Thank you very much, Dr. Anna, for staying with us. Dr. Anna, how might Russia's expanding naval cooperation with ASEAN states affect its strategic posture in the Asia-Pacific? And also, how does it affect ASEAN countries getting closer while countering tensions in South China Sea with China, and also U.S.'s pressure on them?
This is very interesting because that is a part of a Russian strategy which started in 2002 of pivoting to the east. So that is continuation of very long kind of strategic objective, which has really very little to do with the current geopolitical climate. So in that vein, Southeast Asia is a very dynamic region. It's a booming region. It's a region which is holding more and more power. It also has a strategic position. Russia has always had an idea of have some kind of presence in the Indian Ocean, in this called sort of South Pacific rim. They used to have, the Soviet Union used to have facility in Vietnam. Now they are kind of, it is now a Vietnamese facilities, but Russian side can use it. Russia has put a lot of effort into developing naval cooperation with Myanmar. Again, that goes back maybe 10, 15 years. Now we are seeing the fruits of this effort. The new partner, for example, is Indonesia. Indonesian relations with the Soviet Union have always been quite adversarial. Now, Indonesia have been holding naval exercises with Russia. Now, Russian Deputy Defense Minister is taking part in the meeting of ASEAN defense ministers. He had meetings with Defense Minister of Laos, which again is old Soviet ally, but also new partnerships are developing, like with Malaysia, which has never been in the Soviet orbit. So we're seeing very dynamic, very multifaceted, very active Russian defense diplomacy. The idea is that they do not want to see, from Russian point of view, the version of NATO expansion into Southeast Asia. Look what they have done to us in Asia and, in Europe, and maybe that's where Americans and the West in general, Australians, are going to kind of get their hand. And we need to have some kind of counterbalance, counterweight to that option.
Yes, Dr. Anna, unfortunately, we're running out of time for this discussion, but thank you very much for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from London. Now we move on to our next news. To the Middle East, despite a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza, violence and casualties continue to mount. Gaza's health ministry has reported on Saturday, 1st of November, that 5 more people were killed and 17 bodies were recovered in the past 24 hours, bringing the overall death toll from the 2-year conflict to 68,858 people, with 170,664 people wounded, according to Gaza's health ministry. Authorities said many victims remain trapped under the rubble as rescue teams struggle to access heavily damaged areas since the ceasefire began on October 11th. At least 226 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 600 injured. The ceasefire, intended to allow aid delivery and recovery efforts, has been repeatedly strained by isolated attacks and ongoing tensions. On the other hand, according to Israel, the remains of 3 people handed over by Hamas to the Red Cross this week do not belong to any of the hostages. This latest setback that could undermine a U.S.-brokered ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andy Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, what's your analysis on how is this ceasefire holding off on, as we see there's different reports of attacks and different reports of deaths coming in 4 days straight?
Well, perhaps predictably, the ceasefire, the phase 1 of the ceasefire, which involves actually not shooting at each other, but also hostage and prisoner exchanges and the delivery of aid, is under some strain and stress. There have been violations of the ceasefire, strictly speaking, on both sides. Delivery of aid has been delayed, partly because of the destroyed infrastructure. It's simply difficult to get aid where it is needed. And so it's under strain. And this latest episode, the reports of the 5 dead and the 17, add to that stress and add to the strains on this. It needs to be noted, of course, that we don't know if the 5 killed over the weekend were combatants or non-combatants, whether they were civilians or fighters. And the 17 bodies that are recovered from the rubble were killed before the ceasefire kicked in. So there's been so much damage and so much destruction visited upon the Strip that it's predictable that there will be bodies being recovered. But as they are recovered, stories about them contributes to the stresses and strains on the peace process, the ceasefire process.
And do you think that disarmament of Hamas is still feasible under this? And who do you think would be, or when do you think would be the international stabilization force would be getting in Gaza?
Well, that's not likely to happen soon. That stabilization force is not quite a traditional United Nations peacekeeping force, but it's similar in that fighting has to stop before they can interpose themselves and reassure both the Israelis and Hamas that the other side is not up to no good. So we're not quite there yet, and we're certainly nowhere near Hamas voluntarily disarming, which is a fraught process in any case. How does one verify that? What does it mean that every single fighter will give up every single weapon? That remains to be seen. So the first phase, the ceasefire and the delivery of humanitarian aid, etc., exchange of hostages and prisoners, was meant to be the easy phase. And it is turning out to be anything but. I still think we see forward motion. I still think we see possibilities for phase 2 just around the corner or over the horizon. But the easy phase is turning out to be not that easy, and that raises some doubts in my mind about phase 2 and phase 3.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Andrew, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. Iran has expressed readiness to resume talks on its nuclear program, though Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has accused the United States of making unacceptable and burdening demands. Speaking in an exclusive interview, Araghchi has said that Tehran seeks a fair resolution and is open to indirect negotiations, not direct talks with Washington. Iran maintains that it is entitled to pursue peaceful nuclear energy, while U.S. officials insist on stricter limits and monitoring. Mediation efforts by Qatar are ongoing, with Doha working to bridge differences between these two nations. The latest developments come after 5 failed rounds of talks in 2025 this year, and growing regional tension, including Israeli military operations against Iran and U.S. strikes on nuclear sites. Despite earlier rejection by Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Araghchi's remarks suggest a potential diplomatic opening of mutual terms that can be reached. Now we go back to Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this latest statements from Foreign Minister of Iran, why do you think, or what do you think could be the motive and reason behind his latest reports of Iran's openness to indirect nuclear talks with U.S.?
Well, I think there are 2 sets of motives here, one of which is very, very obvious. The sanctions are crippling, the American sanctions are crippling the Iranian economy. And of course, the Iranians, being more or less rational actors, would like those sanctions to go away. They only go away in the context of renewed negotiations. So that's one thing. But another more pernicious, I think, spin on this is that Iran has been stripped of its conventional deterrence. It had this ring of fire around Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc. And all of that, with the exception of the Houthis, has been completely dismantled and destroyed. And the Israelis have demonstrated that they can strike downtown Iran at will without suffering a single casualty. Their air raids of a few months back, for example. And that puts Iran back in the old situation where their only credible deterrent would be to acquire nuclear weapons. Now, they're prohibited from doing so because they're signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968. They signed on in 1970 or ratified it in 1970. And under that agreement, they are allowed to pursue civilian nuclear technology, but the International Atomic Energy Agency monitors them to make sure that they're not weaponizing that technology. The civilian and military uses are very close. And that International Atomic Energy Agency has on several occasions said that Iran is not complying with the restrictions imposed by the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the United States is saying they're very much working towards acquiring a breakout capability, which means they could deploy a bomb in months or weeks. And that, of course, is unacceptable to the U.S. and to Israel. And so to the extent that Iran wants negotiations, they want to negotiate away some of the safeguards that would prevent that from happening to allow them to pursue their policies while having the sanctions reduced. I don't think Washington is going to go for it.
And what do you think, what role can Qatar and any other country play as a mediator in bridging the gap between Iran and U.S.?
Well, I think they have a role to play. As you said earlier, the prospect of direct talks between Tehran and Washington are nil. It's not going to happen. So if you want to have negotiations, you have to find a third party that will play that role, a neutral arbiter or facilitator. And the Qataris have decided that they're willing to do that. They've kind of carved out that niche for themselves in the region. And my judgment is that they are more or less neutral. They want to see a deal done which satisfies both parties. I don't think, even given their track record and given their identity now, diplomatic identity as deal makers, I think that the distance between Tehran and Washington is too wide to be bridged by Qatar.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to Asia. The South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has issued a statement expressing hope for greater economic cooperation with China. President Lee has highlighted that as neighboring countries, China and South Korea are interdependent, not only geographically but also economically. He has also noted that the deepening people-to-people exchanges between these two nations. The South Korean president made the statement while wishing China a successful APEC summit next year in Guangdong province. Let's listen into what the South Korean leader has said.
대한민국과 중국의 관계도 마찬가지입니다. 지리적으로 아주 가깝고 경제적으로 서로 깊이 의지하고 협력하는 관계입니다. 중국 당국도 대한민국 정부도 존재하는 이유는 국민들의 더 나은 삶이고 희망 있는 국가를 만드는 것 아니겠습니까? 중국에게도 대한민국에게도 모두 도움이 되는 여러 영역에 특히 경제, 민간 교류, 그리고 나아가서는 동북아의 평화와 안정을 위한 역할을 어떻게 할 것인지 등에 대해서도 협력과 소통의 계기를 많이 만들고 또 높여가려고 합니다.
Now we move on to our next news. The UNSC has adopted a resolution stating that genuine autonomy for Western Sahara under Moroccan sovereignty could be the most feasible solution to Rabat's 50-year conflict with the Algeria-backed Polisario Front. King Mohammed VI of Morocco has said that Morocco is seeking a win-win and face-saving solution for all the parties to the conflict. He has also urged Sahrawi refugees held in the Polisario-run Tindouf camps in southwestern Algeria to endorse autonomy. Western Sahara, a tract of desert the size of Britain, has been the scene of Africa's longest-running territorial dispute since colonial power Spain left in 1975. Now let's listen into what the Moroccan king has said.
شعبي العزيز، بعد 50 سنة من التضحيات ها نحن نبدأ بعون الله وتوفيقه فتحا جديدا في مسار ترسيخ مغربية الصحراء والطي النهائي لهذا النزاع المفتعل في إطار حل توافقي على أساس مبادرة الحكم الذاتي.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX.